Y'all, it is finally raining in Oakland after like 6 months, more than 6 months of drought. And all I want to do is cozy up in a blanket and do a puzzle and eat ragu. I'm having a really hard time working. It's a problem. Hi, I'm Liv, and welcome to the Leopard Lodge. If you're new here, this is a channel dedicated to creative projects in the home. So ragu is one of those things that I think intimidates people because they think it's going to be really complicated and a lot of work, and it's really not actually that complicated. It's fairly straightforward. You put in a little bit of work on the front end, but then your stove or your oven or your slow cooker is gonna take on the brunt of the work. Yes, this does take time, but it can be done a day or two ahead of time, and some would argue it tastes better that way. But this is also something you can do day of, and it's still going to be delicious. I usually start mine in the morning, and by the time dinner rolls around, we're good to go. But of course, step one, make a cocktail. The Black Manhattan is one of my favorite twists on a classic cocktail. It typically uses a 2-to-1 ratio of rye or bourbon to Amaro, often Averna Amaro, with a few dashes of Angostura bitters and a few dashes of orange bitters. However, I like to use equal parts Amaro and sweet vermouth. I find Carpano Antica to be one of the best sweet vermouths to use in a Manhattan, just a personal preference. It's very well balanced and very classic. So let's make this. 2 ounces of bourbon, half an ounce of Averna, or any Amaro you'd like to use, half an ounce of Carpano Antica, or any sweet vermouth, a few dashes of Angostura bitters, and I like to use black walnut bitters. These are kind of hard to find, so feel free to substitute orange bitters, or a mix of those two and leave out the Angostura. Find out what you like. Ice. And stir. Strain into a coupe. Grab an orange peel, press the oils into the drink, and garnish with the peel and a couple cherries. Now, let's get into ragu. The beautiful thing about ragu is that once you understand the basics, you can recreate it with different meat or vegetables and different flavors and have a variety of different dishes to eat. You can do this recipe with chicken. I just happened to have duck legs on hand that needed to get eaten, and also maybe try duck because it's not that scary. It's basically just like cooking chicken, sort of. In this case, it's just like cooking chicken, but in other cases, it's not just like cooking chicken. Just to clarify, sprinkle both sides of your chicken or duck with salt, pepper, and a bit of nutmeg. Start your chicken or duck legs in a cold pan and turn the burner on to medium-low. Let it cook for about 15 minutes. This will slowly render off the fat while browning the skin and making it crispy. If you've ever had rubbery chicken skin, ew. That's what we're trying to avoid with this process. In the meantime, dice a mirepoix of fennel, onion, carrot, leek, and celery. Watch my video on mirepoix here. While you are still waiting for the fat to render out of the skin, make yourself a bouquet garni. I'm using rosemary, sage, thyme, parsley, and bay leaf. Last time I made one of these, I called it a sachet d'épicé. Sachet d'épicé. I still don't know how to say it. But that is when you wrap the herbs in a cheesecloth and tie it off with string.
A sachet de piece is like a fancy French word for bag of spices.
When you just wrap the herbs with string, it's called a bouquet garni. My sincerest apologies for the mix-up. Once your bird skin is looking nice and brown and there's a decent amount of fat rendered, turn the legs to get any skin that hasn't had contact with the pan to get that to render and brown as well. This may mean flipping it around a few times and will take about 10 minutes. But believe me, it's worth it to avoid rubbery skin and an overly rich dish. When you are satisfied with this process, take the legs out and put them in your roasting pan, or your slow cooker if you're doing that. Strain your rendered fat and save for another use. Put your pan back on medium heat and add a little bit of olive oil. Toss in your mirepoix. Don't forget to salt and pepper this. I did not show it on camera, but it is very necessary. And a little more nutmeg too if you want. The reason I'm using olive oil instead of the duck fat is because olive oil is a little bit less rich and more duck fat is still going to render out of the legs while they're cooking in the oven. Cook for about 5 minutes, stirring frequently. You want to render out all of the water and have nicely browned vegetables, but don't burn them. Deglaze the pan with about half a cup of cooking wine. I prefer white wine for chicken and red wine for duck. Just a preference. Do what your heart tells you. About a quart of chicken stock. Mix all together. Add this to the roasting pan, being careful not to splash the top of the skin. The legs should be about 3/4 of the way submerged with the skin sitting on top of the liquid, more or less. Put in your bouquet garni, place it in the oven and turn it on. Here's where things get a little bit wishy-washy. There isn't an extreme rule here. Your meat needs to cook for at least 3 hours. If you're going to do the 3 hours, I would put the oven at about 325. If you want to leave it to cook longer, you could scale down that temperature. Today, I put it on for 275 and pulled it out at about the 4.5 hour point to shred it. We'll get to that in a second. I'm not really sure how slow cookers work. I'm just kind of old school and do the oven thing, but I'm sure if you have a slow cooker, you can figure it out. Just be warned that you won't get crispy skin if you put it in the slow cooker. When it looks like this, pull the roasting pan from the oven and give this video a thumbs up because doesn't that look delicious? At this point, you could serve the legs like this on some polenta or with potatoes or some sides, however you want to do it. But if you'd like to put it on pasta, grab a couple of forks. Carefully remove the skin and eat it as a snack because it will be wasted in the liquid. Start shredding with the forks by pulling at the meat. But you want to make sure that a couple of things make it out. There's 2 bones, one in the thigh and one in the leg. And there's some cartilage that connects these, as well as a little bit of cartilage at the ankle. And there's this long, skinny shard of a bone, and you really don't want that to wind up in your throat. At this point, you could crank up the heat to evaporate some of the liquid and get to cooking your pasta, or you could throw it back in your oven and let it keep cooking on slow and low for a while longer. If at any point it is not feeling thick enough, you can dissolve a tablespoon of cornstarch into a 1/4 cup of water and mix it into your ragu. You could also put in a tablespoon of flour when you're cooking your mirepoix and have a similar result, but I forgot. If serving with pasta, bring the ragu to a simmer on the stove in a pan. Cook your noodles to al dente in a well-salted pot of water. Add some pasta water and a knob of butter to the ragu before adding your noodles, and cook until it all melds together into deliciousness, like a minute. Finish with cheese, chopped parsley, dill, tarragon, and chives, or just parsley. And enjoy! Well, that's all we have for today, folks. If you'd like to support the content creation, you have the opportunity to buy me a coffee in the link in the description. And with that, I'm going to go enjoy a cozy, rainy bowl of ragu with some friends, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!